I don't know about you, but I find the hardest part of session prep is developing the personalities of the NPCs my party will be interacting with. Thankfully, I interact with people every day, and as such, I can use the people I know in real life to inform how I develop my NPCs. I lose that experience, however, once the party hops into another realm, especially if that realm is the Feywild. Personalities in this realm are so alien, and I don't really know how to make them feel believable without them becoming caricatures. At least, I didn't. That is, until I found good representation of the beings living in this plane. Today, on Intoxicated Intellect, we are going to explore the Feywild and the beings that populate it through the lens of some of our favorite fairy tales. My name is Ben, and let's get into the Feywild. Where to start? Why don't we look at the general physical descriptors of the Feywild and see what we can derive from those? The Feywild is described in general D&D lore as an analog to the prime material plane, meaning that it, topographically speaking, resembles the prime material world. Similar mountain ranges, rivers, oceans, land masses, etc. The key difference between the two is the dramatic nature of the Feywild. This realm is often described as more majestic, more colorful, more vivid. All in all, it's just more. Much like the landscape is described as more, its peoples are often described similarly. More capricious, more intense, more moody, but still analogous to those beings of the prime material. If the Feywild and its people are often described as more, well, we have one avenue to start developing the Feywild as a living, breathing entity. If you know someone who falls in love quickly, gets angry often, holds grudges, or drops everything to help someone, turn that personality trait up to 11 and see what that space has to explore. This is a great place to start thinking about denizens of the Feywild, but if you rely on just this alone, you run the risk of creating caricatures instead of characters. So, how do you take that start and develop it from a one-dimensional being to a sound, three-dimensional being that feels like a living aspect of your world? This is where we turn to children's stories, to fairy tales. Here, we turn to the Brothers Grimm. I had the guys here at Intoxicated Intellect send me some of their favorite fairy tales, and I took them to the brothers to see what I could learn. Let's start with one of the most ubiquitous fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood. We all know the basics of the story. A little girl in a red hood is delivering goods to her grandmother in the woods. She meets a wolf, who leads her astray so that he can go eat the grandmother. When Little Red reaches the cabin, the wolf eats her, only for her to be rescued by a passing hunter who had been tracking the wolf. And together, they kill the wolf. Now, what can we glean from this tale? Firstly, creatures of the Feywild hold no consistent form. They are as likely to look like an animal, a tree, or a person, but that has almost no bearing on their level of intelligence. The wolf appears as a simple creature, but is capable of making plans in advance and lead our hero astray. In addition to this, you can see how the creature's impulse governs its actions, and how in satiating the desires, the Fey creature opens himself up to being defeated. Fey are clever beings, but they are often overly confident when they feel that they have the upper hand, especially as they get more powerful. It also gives you and your players another tool. Many times, Fey are in opposition to one another, like the wolf and the hunter in this story. These Fey often hold opposing desires and motivations, or at the very least competing ones. These create good ways for your players to level the playing field with powerful Fey creatures. The big takeaway from this tale is that Fey in general are amorphous, guided by desire, and clever enough to delay their moves until they can get the most benefit. Now, with a few examples of what Fey may appear as, and how potentially convoluted their plans may be, let's take a look at how Fey make deals. Because if there are any creatures as apt to make deals as devils, it's the Fey. For this, we take a look at the story of Rumpelstiltskin. At the core of this tale is a desperate miller who goes to the king and brags that his daughter can spin straw into gold. The king demands to see this and has the daughter brought before him. He places her in a room full of straw and instructs her to spin it into gold by morning. If she is unable to, then she would be killed. As the daughter laments, a small individual comes to speak with her and offers her salvation in exchange for something of value. The daughter readily agrees, and Rumpelstiltskin spins the straw for her. When the king checks in the morning, he finds the room full of gold, and his greed sets in. He locks the miller's daughter up for 2 more nights with increasing amounts of straw. If she is successful on the 3rd night, the king will take her as his wife. If she fails on either night, she will be killed. Each night, Stiltskin once again returns to the girl and offers his help in exchange for something of hers. Well, on the 3rd night, the only thing she has left to bargain with is the life of her firstborn should she marry the king. Stiltskin agrees, spins the straw, the king marries the girl, she has a kid, and Stiltskin comes to collect. The now queen begs him to reconsider the deal, so he decides to make a game of it. Sure of his victory, he offers the queen that if in a certain amount of time she can name his true name, he will leave the kid alone. Otherwise, the kid would be his. The queen eventually finds out his name and is able to save her child. But what can we take from this tale? Now, what we see in this story is how Fae are willing to help if there is something in it for them, and specifically when those things have to do with a soul or a life. When the queen tries to buy off Stiltskin, he remarks that he has no true interest in the riches of men, but a game, especially one where he can derive enjoyment from despair and panic of the queen, that could be just the thing to bring his life more enjoyment. Especially because, once again, he is so sure he is going to win. Remember, Fae are fickle beings, guided by desire, and often overconfident when they have the upper hand. Also, notice the distinct lack of contracts drawn up during this tale. For a Fae, a wayward word can be taken as agreement to a deal, or the completion of a transaction. TMs can use clever wordplay to trick and manipulate their players' characters into situations that they must be then as clever, or lucky, to find their way back out of. A Fae will not go back on their word though. Stiltskin lost his game, and as such he returned the child to the queen. He may try again later to scheme for the child's life, but in that moment he does hold true to his word. So, in recap, thus far we have seen how different and unexpected Fae creatures can appear, how they are not simply creatures of whim, but they are guided by it, and how they can scheme and some of the things that they might want, as well as how willing they are to continue to deal if they think they have the upper hand. What we haven't seen is a representation of the true cruelty and complexity that a Fae can be capable of. But we still have one more tale to review, and I think this one does a good job of showing just that. I am of course talking about the tale of Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel are children belonging to a poor family, with a loving father and a cruel stepmother. Sounds pretty standard so far, right? Well, the family falls upon tough times, and the stepmother forces the father to agree to abandon the kids in the woods. But Hansel is clever. He finds a way back, then another hard time falls upon the family, and once again, the stepmother pushes the father to abandon the kids, deeper in the woods this time. This time, Hansel's plan fails, and they are unable to find their way back, and are lost, wandering the woods, hungry and tired. That is, until they find a small shack in the woods seemingly made of candy. The kids can't help themselves, and they start eating the house only for the resident to come out and find them. At first, this kindly old lady seemingly wants nothing more than to help the kids. But after lulling them into a sense of security, she locks Hansel into a small room and forces Gretel to cook food in order to fatten him up, so that the witch can, well, eat him. Both kids manage to be clever, though. Hansel tricks the witch into thinking he is not fattening himself up, thus buying himself some more time, and Gretel tricks the witch to get close to the oven so that she can push her in and then free her brother. The witch had planned to eat both kids and wound up in an oven instead. The kids then find their way back home to their father, only to find that their stepmother has died in the meantime. Funny coincidence, right? I don't know about you, but my personal headcanon is that the witch and the stepmother are the same being. With this headcanon, we can ascribe a few things to this character. First, the Fae wants the father for themselves. The only way for her to do that is to get rid of the kids. And through manufacturing a lean time for the family, she sets herself up with the ability to convince the father that the right move is to send the kids away. Then, when the kids stumble upon her trap of a house, she can eat them and ensure that they never come back and get between her and the father again. With that frame of reference in mind, we can see the true complexity that a Fae can reach in order to achieve their goals. So, what have we learned? A Fae, by nature, is alien in their behavior, not because they are all that different from beings of the prime material. They are aliens because of the extremes to which their emotions move them. They are ruled by them, but not consumed by them. They are clever, but not omniscient. They are mercurial, but maintain an overarching goal. And above all else, their sense of morality is entirely based on their current desires. The Feywild has so much potential, so much to explore, so many different beings to interact with. Some of my favorite stories in D&D moments have their genesis within the Feywild, and it is in my hope that by looking at potential examples of how the Fey may act and what their motivations may be, you will find it useful in developing a living, breathing Feywild. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like it, and if you feel so inclined, subscribe to the channel. If you have any fun stories from the Feywild or any favorite fairy tales, we would love to hear them in the comments. From all of us here at Intoxicated Intellect, enjoy making your players spin their tires in the mud as they come up against some truly crafty Fey.